Welcome to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. The Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek delivers a look into the world of manufacturing with a focus on stories and trends that can lead you to better solutions. Our guests share tips and outcomes that will help improve your productivity. My name is Dave McKenna from Grantek. I am practice leader of our Smart Packaging group with a focus on label verification, packaging inspection, code data integration, and code date inspection. Today, I'm joined by Leslie Gaylor of Collaborative Quality Improvement LLC. Leslie is the owner of Collaborative Quality Improvement LLC, a quality and food safety consulting company. She's also subcontracts for the commercial quality and food safety solutions. Leslie's highly efficient, results-driven professional with a black belt, and she is a certified quality engineer with her CQE certification. Over 20 years experience in the food and dietary supplements industries, focusing on R&D, food safety, quality systems, quality management before starting her own firm. Leslie worked in leadership and management roles at Kraft Heinz and at Walgreens. Leslie is a quality individual of great quality. Leslie, thank you for joining me on the Industry 4.0 podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
I do like the cheesy line, a quality individual, but Leslie genuinely is a quality individual in the field of quality individuals. So thank you. So first question I'd like to ask people, and Leslie and I have worked together on some large projects and not just large projects, but large new regulatory changes and shifts. And I was personally very impressed with the amount of change, and it's like a snake, a python, and a giant pig. Maybe I shouldn't call regulations a pig. Some people don't like pigs, but yeah, it's a big change. It's huge change management, absorbing new giant regulatory changes. Work with Leslie on that, and curious to hear some of your experiences, your stories. How did you get? What's the story of your career? How did you become a quality individual?
Yeah. My career story is I just studied food process engineering in college, and I kind of assumed I would just go into product development. That seemed to be kind of the career path they advertised most for that major. But during college, I took an internship with Waukesha Cherry Burrell. They're part of the SPX Flow Company, so they manufacture a lot of pumps and heat exchangers and equipment used in the food industry. And so that really exposed me to the manufacturing side and I loved it. Like I really enjoyed kind of the hands-on experience. So that led to my first full-time role at Kraft Foods, working in their corporate process engineering group.
So just
So I
what is just a question? What is product development in like what is that in food world?
So it's more of developing the new food products. So you've got this idea, marketing teams will come to you, or you've got consumer research that says, oh, we see this big opportunity in the market. Consumers are looking for products with higher protein and, lower fat or something. And, in this category of something for breakfast.
Okay.
And so you're kind of developing that new product to meet that need in the market.
Okay.
Um, and there's two parts of that. One is kind of the formulation development, but then the other side is the process. So a lot of people when they think about food, they think about cooking in their kitchen. And it's pretty easy to make, a batch of pancakes for your family of 4 or 5. But if you're thinking about, okay, we want a new high protein frozen pancake and we want to make, 10,000 cases of that an hour, that's a whole different scale. And that's where some of the processing technology side comes in. And so that's kind of where I started at Kraft Foods. And I was doing a lot of work in our pilot plant where we were kind of testing out some of these new product ideas and trying to figure out how we process them on a larger scale. So, kind of working on them, creating them on the pilot scale, and then figuring out how we scale them up to the factories. But through that work, I kind of quickly realized how my lack of true manufacturing experience was going to hold me back. Like I was working on trying to develop these products for the plant, but I didn't know a lot about working in the plant yet. So an opportunity came up to be interim quality manager in one of the sites that I was working with. And so to be honest, knew nothing about quality, but I knew this was my chance to get some manufacturing experience. So I jumped at it. And
how long was the interim supposed to be?
so this assignment, it was about 6 months, So it was just enough to like get me into the manufacturing
Mhm.
role and learn a lot. But then, not stay there too long. So then I could go back to what I was doing before. But then, kind of through that assignment, I realized I loved working in quality and I loved working in manufacturing. So after that, I was always looking for different roles that I could do that involved quality and manufacturing. So I did a lot of different roles working with external manufacturing sites that were co manufacturing products for us, making sure they're following our quality policies, also a lot of with our internal sites being the corporate quality resource for those sites. I also earned my black belt through that you mentioned at the beginning. And that's where I worked on a lot of quality improvement projects where we're trying to figure out how do we reduce variation? How do we reduce holds? The goal is always right the first time. We don't want to have to kind of make the food product, but then go back and rework it somehow, so right the first time.
Hmm. And that's a great opportunity to be able to do. It just reminds me of not the same scale, but it reminds me of a summer job. Because I haven't personally had like a interim kind of opportunity ever, and that's an amazing thing. It'd be almost better if there's more of that where people get to try more stuff, or even if it's not for you, it's still adjacent to what you're doing. It's still the same employer, and now you know that other piece of the business, that other side of the business, and you get a
Yeah.
lot better
No, I
perspective.
totally agree, especially, trying things to take you out of your comfort zone. Because, like I said, I jumped at this opportunity because I knew it was in manufacturing, and that's the kind of experience I was looking for. I wasn't looking for quality experience.
Mm.
That was, that even career path hadn't even crossed my mind yet. But then as I was there, I loved it. Quality just felt like home to me. So I've stayed there ever since.
Awesome. The 6 month interim position that never ended. But yeah, no, good story.
Exactly.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Um, we do ask a riddle because we're into AI, and AI is doing everything, and sometimes the AI doesn't. Sometimes I got to warn you, the human being, me, has come up with a better riddle or a funnier one. But sometimes not. And so we're going to ask you a riddle. See if you can outsmart the
Put me on the
AI.
spot here, huh?
Yes, you're challenging against the machine here. What has a heart that doesn't beat? What has a heart
A heart that doesn't
that
beat.
doesn't beat?
I watched The Wizard of Oz recently, so I want to say like the Tin Man,
The
but
Tin Man.
I don't think that's it because he eventually got a heart that beat, I think. Um,
That's tough.
well,
I
since I
have
work
no.
in food, let me think along the lines of food. Romaine, what about an artichoke? Says a artichoke? Have
Artichoke
artichokes
is the
hearts?
correct answer, and I don't know as much about artichokes as I apparently should, and now the whole internet knows that. But I did not. I would not have told you that artichoke has a heart. Well done, well done. Food professional beats
All right.
Dave professional. I like the Tin Man though. The Tin Man.
Yeah, I don't know.
He
Maybe
was
we
trying to
should
get a heart.
try to change the AI program there. I feel like the Tin Man could be a good
It's a
response
better
too.
cultural reference than the artichoke. I bet more people would match the Tin Man one. Let's moving on from hilarity. Industry 4.0. We like to ask a lot of guests this because there's such big definitions of Industry 4.0. It can be data, can be 3D printing, can be funny glasses that let you see things, augmented reality, virtual reality, anything and everything. What does it mean to you? What do you see it as? What do you think?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I actually had not heard the term Industry
Okay.
4.0 until I was preparing for this podcast. I think I'm maybe a bit more of an unusual guest for this one. A lot of my work that I do is the clients bring me in because they want to improve their quality management systems. Typically that's kind of with the goal of needing to pass an upcoming customer audit. But as I dig into those current challenges they're having, a lot of times I'll see the need for technology. They either have extremely manual systems that really could benefit from a good technology solution, a lot of the ones that are out there, or I'll see like disjointed technology implementation. So they maybe have something that's great around their processing area, but all raw material receiving is still manual, and then all finished goods shipping is still manual. And so this technology isn't offering them the benefit because it's one small piece and they still have a lot of challenges or errors inputting and output to that. So as I started kind of trying to figure out what is Industry 4.0, it really had me intrigued because, I do think there's a big opportunity for that in the food industry. And I really hope it leads to more technology being connected end to end to really help reduce the opportunity for human error and improve efficiency.
I think I mean, this is a great response, and happy to have you. I think we had a question earlier from another guest, or a topic for another guest, about when are we going to hit Industry 5.0? When's the next thing coming on? But it's good to have a bit of a grounding in reality that, yeah, many places are not do not already have this fourth industrial revolution, quote unquote, figured out, and have these disjointed systems, and have, I mean, how much paper the food industry is still got piles and piles and piles of paper records for many things. Like, are you seeing it? What percentage is ballpark or
Yes, I
sites are
still
you
see a
seeing it?
lot of paper records. I mean, a
Yeah.
facility I was working with recently, every shift, they had probably at least 60 pages of paperwork, and that was just for one product on one line. So it's huge packets every single shift. And they actually had some of this new technology, some of these big ERP type systems there. And that's, some of what I kind of want to share today, or hopefully some of the insight I can bring is even there's a lot of challenges still out there, even with some of the technology solutions that we have today. So, especially in the food industry, a lot of the sites I've worked with are still heavily reliant on paper records. And
Hmm.
sometimes that's because they don't have the technology, or otherwise, or it could be they have the technology and it's not fully meeting their need. And they have to keep the paper records as a backup.
I mean, paper's really good. Like, it's not good. Let me back that up. Do not quote me on that, internet. Paper works. Paper is hard to displace. Paper, you get the form, you put it on some secure server, you print it, people have it, you hand it to someone, boom, you're done. There's no it's so easy to add, like, if you need to log something, you make a form, you print it, you give it to people, they do it every day, you're done. Like, you have this working. Yes, the limitations,
Mhm.
obviously, of searching it and finding it and measuring it, and when that audit happens or recall, and now you're digging through, which I imagine you've been in a few of these situations.
Yes.
You're going through
Hmm.
boxes and boxes from Iron Mountain or wherever, and
Sometimes it's a lot of paperwork to dig through. One, for an audit, I mean, sometimes when a site, they know the audit's coming, they'll just get carts and they're wheeling carts and carts of the paperwork. And that way they have everything ready there for whatever the auditor could ask. The other scenarios you mentioned is kind of worst case if you're in some sort of recall or withdrawal situation, you're digging through a lot of paperwork. And so that's where, I'm hopeful of a lot of technology can kind of help make that easier and faster, where we're not digging through piles of paperwork anymore.
I guess the examples I've seen, and curious your opinion on this. So ERP was supposed to get rid of some of this, or a lot of this, or much of this, or all of this. The installations I've seen, ERP goes in, and it's a big effort, and corporate's there, and there's an army of wonderful consultant people, and there's money, and it's getting done. But ERP install people want to limit the scope. I'm gonna say some of the ERP companies, or the ERP consultants, want to pull back because they don't want to customize too much. They don't want to make things harder. They want a successful install. So they wind up not customizing, and they pull back. But then you don't actually collect everything the business does, but you have a successful install because you didn't shut the place down and prevent trucks from unloading and all that stuff. But you didn't really meet the goals of it. And then the project's done. Everyone high fives each other. Money's gone from corporate. And then they never extend these things. And or security, right? There's all this, the master data
Mhm.
people are gone, and they're busy just keeping things going. And no one adds to these things over time. Even if they are the right platform, they just don't, they're not continually growing to absorb all that
Yeah.
data. Is that what you've seen, or have you seen different? Like, What's your
No, I,
opinion?
I see all of that. I could probably share a couple examples here. So one, you mentioned ERP, or they have the custom, or they don't want to do the custom. That on the flip side, though, I've seen one company where they did have a lot of custom reports. But fast forward 5 years later with that same ERP system, there's something new, some new regulation or some new change, and they need to update that ERP system. Well, now it's another custom report. So it's almost like once you start with custom reports, anytime you need to change something else,
Mm,
it's another custom report, which is another cost, and then a lot more testing because reports are already custom. And so this change we're making, how do we make sure it's not going to impact everything else that's working today?
got it.
Um, but some other things I've seen with ERP are back to this paperwork example. So one company, they set it up and it was, year end to end. So tracking raw materials coming in all the way finished goods out the door. And they set it up for they wanted to scan the raw materials at point of consumption. So that's much better than, every time a pallet comes to the line, the operator having to kind of hand write, this is the item number, this is the lot code, all the other information. You could just scan it, captures in the computer, great. But when they did that, it slowed the system down too much. And when they were trying to scan everything, there were all sorts of errors or issues that happened. So they set the system up to instead backflush, meaning it kind of knows raw materials are coming in, but it's going to assume it's always the first to expire raw material that was brought to the line. Well, for anyone who's worked in a manufacturing site, that's not always that's always the goal is to use the first to expire items, but something's going on in the warehouse or you can't get to this or that, and so you use materials out of order sometimes. And so they even though they were supposed to be scanning to consumption, they still had to keep their paper records. So they had their electronic system that was kind of saying, this is what I use, but then they always had to compare to the paper records because sometimes lot codes weren't always matching.
Mm,
So still created a lot of manual work. Um, Another example though, so kind of having that experience with one client, then I moved to another site. And one of our issues we're investigating was we had all this information electronically about our raw materials, but operators kept using, we had kind of several holds where the wrong raw material was used. And we were trying to troubleshoot why was that happening. So my thought was, oh, well, they must not be scanning at point of consumption. It must be more manual paper records. So we're realizing too late. When we dug into it, they actually had the scan to consumption feature. So I thought, well, how is this is a technology that's supposed to help prevent these errors? How are they still having all these? Because when you scan it, it should flag that, oh, this is the wrong raw material. You can't use this one. But what we were seeing is they were having a lot of scanning errors. So the operators would try to scan the tag and it either wouldn't scan or the tag was missing or something else was going on. So, and they didn't want to get in trouble for stopping the line because if you slow down batching, your batches aren't ready and the
mm,
next step of the process stops. So they were just kind of manually, they were doing like a visual check, manually collecting tags and trying to reconcile it all at the end of the shift. And as you can imagine, we found errors at the end of the shift. So they even, that's an example of where we had this great solution that should have been working. But then when you lay in the day to day and the challenges, it still wasn't delivering what we were hoping for.
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. Yeah, if you're adding this software system to track your material consumption, to track your traceability, do all this electronic computer, electronic. Well, when you bring that in, what does that mean? That means a whole bunch of manual entry by people who are scanning barcodes, scanning pallets, scanning material labels. So your automated system to do your traceability is built on a whole bunch of manual scans, which
Yes.
don't get done properly all the time. A, that's a lot of just manual work, and B, it doesn't get done properly all the time. And then paper, so that's hard to do. And then paper, if you write it wrong or do it wrong or somebody does something wrong, no one ever knows. So it doesn't make more work. An error in the paper doesn't make more work. If you make a mistake on your paper batch report, does it make a sound? As the old Zen saying
No, it,
goes,
do- it doesn't.
it
Not until
doesn't make a
maybe
sound.
someone. Not till maybe someone reviews it later.
Until they
But
review it later. But if you're an SAP error, that makes a sound. But yeah, that's an
mhm.
interesting point on all this stuff is how much, I don't know that we always think about this. If you bring in any of these systems, this is a good perspective to take away. If you bring in any of this system, how much extra entry and manual stuff are you doing? Hopefully you're not. You're bringing in the data collection, but some of this stuff is still people moving things, people,
Yeah,
the machine can't just magically know what's loaded into it, and
yeah,
something to consider for sure.
yeah. Because I
How
mean,
do you
that's
see?
definitely, yeah,
Oh, go.
anywhere where there's still a manual entry, it's causing the problem. Like in this one, it was all manual entry of the raw materials. Every pallet coming in had to get tagged with that site's, internal barcode, internal system and numbers. And there were for sure errors that happened at that point.
And the dream for this was supposed to be RFID. RFID was supposed to just, it would just scan the whole building and know everything going everywhere, but didn't quite turn out that way. But yeah, lots of scans, more scans errors. Good point. What other sort of challenges do you see in? So one is if you try to do more automated stuff, you're bringing in scans. What is the other sort of challenge that you see around some of that's maybe different now versus 5 to 10 years ago? Any other
Yeah,
challenges
I
or
mean, I
changes?
definitely see a big challenge in the industry with training.
Okay.
So there's so much turnover right now in the food industry, a lot more than I remember seeing 5 or 10 years ago. And it can be a very steep learning curve coming into the food industry. There are a lot of good manufacturing practices and things you have to learn. I mean, everyone kind of grew up with the joke of the 5-second rule. Well, that doesn't really, something falls on the floor, you've got 5 seconds. Well, that doesn't work in a food
No,
plant. That's not
I
allowed.
I thought that was a real thing, industry standard. So that's
No, it's not a
thank you
real
for
thing.
straightening me out.
No, no, not when you're in a food plant. So, there's a lot of training that we need to do, and keeping up with that is very difficult. So that's where I'm, kind of intrigued by a lot of different technology solutions that can maybe help with that. I keep thinking about, everyone's into these short kind of YouTube videos, Instagram videos, and they're used to like short 5 or 10 minute bursts of information. That's not always the approach we've used. We do the old style classroom. Everyone sits down. Here's a big PowerPoint slide, 30 minutes, an hour. Most people are asleep, by 15 minutes sometimes. And it's just not always hitting the mark. And
Mm,
so we need to kind of rethink training and figure out how we can use technology for that. Also, the hands on part is so important to the training. So if we have videos showing this is the actual line that they'll be working on, or even virtual reality kind of type based training,
mhm, mhm.
I think could be exciting.
That's one of the big with digital twin, and one of the commonly referred to Industry 4.0 things, digital twin. You have this digital version of your line. You can digitally commission changes on it. You can make sure everything will fit. But training is one of the other pieces that's brought up as a value from it. Interesting point to this is that is that really the way to go, or do you just do more hands-on stuff? Does stuff sink in better when it is actually out in there with the noise of the plant and you're kind of pulling people off screen so they have that much more focus?
Hmm.
Open question. We've used video stuff. We've been recording video stuff for some systems that we put in and found them successful. I don't know how much, now TikTok, you're being generous when you say 5 to 10 minutes for videos. The
Well, that
the,
shows maybe how out of touch I am. I don't watch these, my kids do.
the
But
new,
yeah,
what's the
you're right,
new,
they're
like,
short.
10, 30 seconds is are people making YouTube shorts or equivalent in your LMS system inside at a company? Are they making
Yeah.
quality? Maybe that's not a bad idea though, honestly. If you had a hilarious shorts about people not putting that beard net on that day, maybe the regulators wouldn't find it hilarious. But yeah,
Yeah.
maybe that is not an opportunity to displace classroom stuff for sure, but for reminders or any of that, do we? Because it's really addictive, the video stuff. I mean, small videos. My kids get
Mhm.
sucked into them. I'll be sucked into it from time to time. I'm ashamed to admit it, but it catches you, and you want to see this stuff. So I'd be curious to know if anyone is using that stuff in
Right.
corporate communications, and if there's a chance for simple stuff like GMP reminders, safety reminders to be kind of done like that. I know airlines, right? If you've flown, they've really switched some of the presentation stuff. They've made some of the safety videos be funny and outlandish. Where some of the people are sitting and they're trying to put their seatbelt on and they're on a beach or something on an airplane, on an airplane seat, just sitting on the middle of a beach. So maybe there is an opportunity to copy.
Yeah, no, I've
Some of
seen those, and definitely I can say those have caught my attention more than the previous ones
Yeah.
have. So,
Is there a challenge with people really learning GMP stuff though, or is that it's more there's new people to the food industry, and is it the same level of difficulty training new people to the food industry now as it was, or there's just more turnover, so you're just having to have more people get entered into it?
uh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I almost think it's a little bit of both. I
Okay.
mean, we're always constantly learning. So, some things on GMPs that maybe we were allowed to do 5, 10 years ago, we're no longer allowed to. So
Mm,
everything is more and more strict. But then also, as we brought in more technology into the food plants, there's a lot more they need to learn. So again, it's not just some paperwork, but now there's this kind of fancy computer screen that's controlling all the valves and everything on the process. And there's a lot more that they have to learn that way. So I do think it's both. And I think sometimes too, the challenges, they're under so much pressure because we want to be efficient. We want to drive down costs. We want to get as much throughput as we can. And so taking that little bit of extra time for some of the GMPs, I'll say, and make sure I'm washing my hands a full 20 seconds and then using the hand sanitizer after that. And or I drop this on the floor, I need to go wash it before I use it again. Well, I've got to walk 20 feet away, 100 feet away to the sanitation room, clean that. That's going to slow me down by 5 minutes. So maybe I'll just try to use it, which
yeah.
obviously we shouldn't do. So it's a combination of things, but I do think it's almost some of it is habits too. So if they're not used to doing some of these things at home, they don't have the habit yet of some of these good manufacturing practices. So it's forming the habit as well.
That's an I mean, I people do not wash their hands at home, and as we, I mean, I think it's then they bring that to work. I can see, I mean, I can see it. You don't think of this, but in the interview or in the hiring process, as it's been harder for manufacturers to hire, I imagine they're maybe getting a more of a mixed bag of candidates at times, and yeah, you would need to train some of this. I think you brought up a really good point of you talk about the controlling valves and systems through SCADA screens and automation systems, and tying and challenges learning that among other systems. And then you mentioned earlier all these disjointed systems. The industry kind of, there's a lot of different software. I'll just start with software or control screens or systems in a manufacturing plant. It's all different ages. It's all different. It's been built by different people, and it's been built, like, the user interface on everything is completely different. So there might be some screen that's SAP and it's like blue, and you got to know all these codes to type things into and hit tab 12 times and then F8 and then F4. Or you may have some touchscreen thing to control a valve, and then a different one down the line, and that they have different colors between them and different standards and different designs on everything. Uh, it's challenging that so much stuff is so different, I think, and maybe we forget when
Yeah.
we're adding all this new. Again, you're going to go add a bunch of software to a plant. None of this is the same. I'm just in my head. I'm comparing it to my phone. If I install a new app from my phone, even though I don't know that app, everything kind of works the same way. Everything kind of has a back button in the top left, and they have that hamburger menu, and things kind of work all the same, even if they're made by different vendors, different software companies. A plant does not have that. So as you're adding new technology, it'd be nice if you could do all of the new stuff in a similar way with a similar look, shape and feel. And I don't think there's enough attention to that. Everyone's just buying something new, which is going to be different and not match anything else that was in the plant. Yeah, harder for training, harder for people if you have such inconsistency between equipment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've definitely, met people, or even as I've moved between different food products, or either working in a meat plant and then you go to a bakery plant, very different. And then you go into a dairy plant, again, very different, not only because of the type of process and some of the GMPs you have to follow, but the equipment's very different, the technology is very different. As you said, they have a different software system. So even though you're still within the food industry, it's going to look very different.
Mhm. So what are some of we talk about adding new stuff and challenges around training. What is some of the new things that you see being added? What are new plant managers getting? What's some of the new technology insights that you see?
Um, so I mean, some of the new things are some of the things that are most exciting, especially in the quality world. I mean, one is advances in sanitation technology. Those are so important, and that's kind of what's I don't know, people will laugh, but it kind of gets me most excited because cleaning and sanitation in a plant, it is so important. It's not glamorous. It is one of the most difficult jobs to do well, but it is so critical. If you don't have clean equipment, if you don't have a clean line, you can't make safe food. And, that's another way we talk about the learning curve. Maybe think about how you're cleaning your house at home. How often do you truly clean your bathrooms? When you're scrubbing your countertop, are you using just water and wiping it down, or are you
I'm
using
not.
a
I'm
good
not. I don't like the accusatory tone, Leslie. But no,
Well,
keep going.
you're right. Sometimes I'm talking to myself too. Like I go enjoy cleaning. I'm not gonna lie. Um, and it's not always intuitive how to get a good deep clean. And so that's where, there's a lot of cool technology.
I mean, I only think of chemicals. Chemicals comes to mind, but what else? Like, is it new chemicals or what's new?
No, there's different dry ice technologies. So especially cleaning in a dry plant, because sometimes, when you're thinking about dry products, powdered products, water is the enemy. You want to keep everything dry. Um, so there's cleaning with dry ice, ozone, trying to think. There's like conveyor belts. Sometimes conveyor belts are extremely long, difficult to clean. So there's now devices that will kind of fit and cover around the conveyor belt, and you just run the conveyor and it cleans it as the
Mm.
conveyor is running. So those are very cool. There's one I was just saying about, even once sanitation's done, it's kind of a device that you can shine on the equipment, and it's supposed to highlight if bacteria is still there to see it.
Or
So that's
like that dark, like that black light you take to the hotel, or maybe you
yes.
shouldn't take it because it's
I
better
know you
not to
might not
know.
want to do that, but because that's always like, we think we cleaned it or visibly clean, but that's kind of one thing you learn working in the food industry. Visibly clean doesn't always truly mean it's clean.
Mm.
So we're always kind of swabbing and seeing if we can detect bacteria still there. But that it takes a couple days to culture and get the results of your swabs. So the more technology we have that's more instantaneous, where we can know right away, did we get it clean? Or if we didn't, to go back and re-clean is very helpful. So that's one area. Another is kind of automated verification. So the worst thing in the world that you want would be like a recall related to, we use the wrong ingredient or we put the wrong label on. There's nothing worse than that. And so that's where, we're trying to, the new technology that, as we're talking about, automated scanning of ingredients to make sure we brought the right ingredient to the line, but then also scanning to make sure we had the correct label on the line, especially when you think about allergens. Unfortunately, allergen recalls are one of the highest reasons for recalls, and mislabeling is typically a key driver of that. And you would think in theory it should be so simple. Like we know we're running, I don't know, almond cherry flavor, but I put the chocolate peanut butter label on the line.
Hmm.
You're running cherry almond. It should be pretty easy to make sure we've got a cherry almond label. But there's a lot of different reasons why, unfortunately, sometimes the wrong label is used. And so, some of these new technologies to verify we have the right one are very exciting. Now, unfortunately, though, I've also seen challenges in those, or even some companies that had that technology implemented, but human error still found its way in. and still had an issue. One example sometimes with label verification, if you set it up where you have to train the scanner each time or each changeover, okay, here's the new label I'm looking for, it's sometimes going to get trained wrong. So you might tell it again, even though you're running cherry almond, you told it you're running peanut butter chocolate. And so it was looking for peanut butter chocolate labels. That's what it found. And we thought we were good to go.
Yeah, we do not support installation of training systems. So when we do label verification installs, I will tell people, do not recommend this. It's not the
Yeah.
right move. You have now trained on the person is going to train on what they brought to the line. If they brought the wrong thing, you've now trained the wrong thing. You're going to run the wrong thing, and it happens. I know it seems like the safety of your product and the correct packaging really does depend on one forklift driver at times, one forklift driver and one operator, and then a supervisor quality person is, I think, at many places supposed to kind of sign off on changeover or on something at the start. But or am I right on that? Is it sometimes really just two people? One brings the stuff, the other loads it, and then, hey, whoops, we've been using the wrong thing at startup. Is that
Well, there is a lot to it. There definitely is a lot of plants kind of standard across the board. You'll have your changeover controls. So
mm,
where you're changing over, you're starting up the new product, there's that kind of first package sign off that, yes, this is the right label, everything else is correct. Where I see some of the challenges actually coming in though is as we're running, okay, we knew the first pallet of labels we brought to the line was correct, but now we're running for 2 days straight. And so there's 20 different pallets of labels we're bringing, always making sure, every pallet after that is correct. But I've also seen where maybe labels got mixed up at the site that's making the labels. So they give you a palette that, again, I'll stick with my same kind of analogy here, that it says these are cherry almond labels. There's maybe, and this is kind of a wraparound label, we'll say. So there's 20 cases on here, but somehow one case of the peanut butter chocolate got mixed on that
got mixed
palette.
in?
So even if your palette says it's cherry almond, the first one you pull off is cherry almond. But if there was an issue building that palette and if peanut butter chocolate snuck in, you might not see it.
Yeah, you're vulnerable to all the mistakes upstream of your packaging vendor. I was at a beverage plant and they had issues in the middle of a pallet of cans. There was the wrong can, which you can't see from the outside
Yeah.
because it's like
Mm-hmm.
buried in the middle. And um, I mean, that's a it's a challenging problem to always do for the future, but technology can solve that. On the are you seeing any other new scans? So that's one that's been around for a time, and there's lots of companies that still haven't adopted that, but I say most are. Is there other new technology piece beyond sanitation, label verification? Any other sort of new frontier you see coming in?
Uh, I know there's a lot more. Sanitation is not really one of my key focus areas, so I can't always speak to all of them. But I know there is definitely a lot of work being done out there. And so, a lot of your sanitation chemical companies and so forth, they can help keep you up to speed on,
Okay.
some of the other new technologies coming.
Oh, good. Do you see much for material inspection? Because that's one I'm hearing of some. I see some new requests for it. I see some more
Yeah.
challenging. Is that one that's
Yeah, foreign material for sure is another one that anytime, any improvements in that technology are a welcome and much appreciated benefit to the industry. Some products I've worked with, there's density challenges. So, some of the different inspection devices rely on density differences. And so we haven't been able to overcome, they might say, oh, X-ray technology is great for this. Well, I don't know, it doesn't, because the density of our product is too similar to the density of the material we're trying to detect. And
mm,
so we can't detect it in there. But there's a lot of vision systems out there that can do some pretty cool things. But I still today see for a true robust foreign material detection, you need a couple different types of devices in line in series. Especially, metal detectors sometimes, obviously can be great for metal. They have their limitations as well. But if you have plastic concerns and other things like that on your line, the metal detector isn't going to capture that. A lot of times the combination between X-ray machine and a metal detector can be very helpful. Um, but you also have to understand kind of that equipment in your process. What are the conditions like in your plant? How much background vibration, electrical noise, things like that are going on. Even sometimes your products, if you have a product that has a very high salt content, things like that, it can make it more difficult for these detection devices as well.
Hmm. That's why we have people who know this stuff, quality individuals. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting challenge of you. None of these sensors is going to do it on its own. None of them, because the vision system can't look inside something. An X-ray can't see certain things. A metal detector can't detect non-metal.
Mhm.
And so you got to layer all these levels of protection, and that's the hard part with foreign material. Even stuff that's on top of product in front of a camera, foreign material can be anything. Foreign material can be plastic, it can be wood, it can be metal, it can be small, it can be big, it can. I feel like this is a bad Dr. Seuss moment here on the podcast. It can be
Yeah.
on a plane, it can be in a train. Foreign material is anything and
Hmm.
everything. And how do you make a thing that detects anything and everything? Hard.
It,
And
it is. It's very difficult, especially when you're dealing with some raw agricultural items. I've worked in, nut processing or different kind of vegetables and produce coming in. And you think about these items coming from the fields. That's where you really, I mean, your Dr. Seuss riddle could go on forever. And so, there's a lot of work kind of put into trying to make sure there's no foreign material in that product so we can keep it safe.
hmm. Tough challenge, and new technology, I guess, opens new opportunities, but then you're adding more equipment in your chain, and then hard. No, I guess some things are hard and don't get easy, and there's maybe new opportunities to try to pursue them. But no, thank you for good points. I did want to ask a question of a previous guest, and then I'll give you the chance to ask another guest a question. So uh, what is, from an earlier guest, what is the most challenging solution or situation you have got into while delivering an Industry 4.0 solution, and how did you overcome it?
Hmm. Well, I'd say it's probably one of the projects that I'm working through on right now with the new FSMA 204 traceability regulation, which I think you kind of alluded to earlier in this. Theoretically, the solution seems easy, or for those who aren't familiar with this, it's a new traceability regulation for some specific FDA regulated food products where they've got more defined rules around what information must be supplied in terms of traceability and lot code information all the way down through the supply chain. So it's all the way from the raw material all the way through to the retail store or the restaurant. And so it's really this interoperability between systems is all of a sudden becoming much more important. So you've got to assign a traceability lot code and pass it down with the other kind of key data elements that are part of this regulation to your customer. But as we said before, there's a lot of companies, they all have their different technologies. Some are more advanced than others. And so these WMS systems were designed for maybe one manufacturer and what their needs were, but they didn't design their ERP system for how does this link with all of my customers and the retailers and the wholesalers and everyone I'm going to be providing this item to. So we're trying to figure out how do we link all this traceability information because a lot of individual companies maybe have it, but then as it moves through the supply chain, it's sometimes getting lost. So a lot of companies are looking at like the GS 128 barcodes or a 2D data matrix.
So
And
if I can jump in for a
yeah,
second. So we have a new regulation. We need to send data about product. We need to collect data about our manufacturing process or about our product that we manufactured and send it downstream. And it's 2020, 2024, Industry 4.0. It's the future. and how are we going to do this? We're going to use barcodes and we're going to print stuff. So paper, this is where I'll go back to my previous statement. Paper is good. I mean, maybe we're printing it on a box instead of making a piece of paper that goes with it. But that's where it's an interesting moment there, right? Like new
Yeah.
regulatory thing. How do I get this information shared all these places? Well, we got to print stuff. There's no other like easy way to do anything else.
You print stuff, you're meaning the barcodes or the shipping manifest
Yeah, yeah,
paperwork?
yeah.
I mean, definitely. But then the other key part of this regulation is if the FDA suspects that your product is maybe part of a foodborne illness outbreak, they could come to you and ask for all your records for specific items or lot codes, and you have to turn that around in 24 hours.
Hmm.
So if you're still heavily reliant on paper, which there's nothing in the regulation that says you have to use electronic systems. So it is left open for different methods that our companies are using. But to meet this 24-hour turnaround time, you're going to send people over to your Iron Mountain site and be digging through records.
So we need to
The last,
electronically print our paper so that we can search for it later. But yeah,
Mhm.
interesting. Okay. And so
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 it is,
this is a big
yeah,
challenge, this.
yeah, it is a big challenge, and a lot of companies are thinking that, these barcodes are somehow embedding the data into each case or each pallet is a good idea. But then, in one of the companies I was working with, we were trying to figure out, okay, we don't have the equipment today on the line to install these print and apply stickers for GS128 barcodes. So we went down the path of scoping, okay, what would this take? Well, this is an older facility. We have a lot of lines that are all kind of crammed in together. In some places, we couldn't even find room on the line to put one new printer, let alone trying to figure out how do we error proof this. And so, kind of knowing, okay, these printers maybe aren't perfect. What if it prints a barcode that's a little bit smudged or is put on the case wrinkled? We're going to want a way to correct that, and we don't want to have to stop the line. So we'd kind of would want redundant printers in a way to, either reject those cases or fix it in line with a secondary printer. But again, there was no room. And I mean, the project price tag got extremely high that it just wasn't feasible to do. So then we've kind of gone back to the drawing board. So a simple request and even, technology that kind of is readily available today
Mhm.
turned out to be very difficult to implement in some cases in some facilities.
Hmm. Space and cost being
Space and cost for
and
sure.
space drives more cost sometimes if you got to move this and turn that and cut this conveyor and run it through here and then add something. Well, so this is not the that's a tough situation. And so I guess in all this technology challenges and in the software world, we're not always necessarily thinking about this. And a lot of industry 4.0 stuff, I think it gets pushed to a little more software. Software will always fit somewhere generally, but
Mhm.
what's it interacting with? It's interacting with a screen on the plant floor. If you got room to add that, it's interacting with a printer. If you got room to add that, it's interacting with cameras. You have room to add that, or other
Yeah.
devices you're adding. So definitely difficult situation, and probably something a lot of other companies are grappling with at the same time, and especially again older facilities. Are you ready for tech? Funny question. Your biggest question maybe on are you ready for new technology and advancements is just how much room you have, how much floor plan. What's step one on your AI strategy should
Yeah.
probably be, is there enough room in your factory to add more metal objects?
Is
Maybe.
there enough room? And then also, what is the design of that metal object, I'll say, because, some of these printers and equipment I'm looking at, I don't know if sanitary design was
No,
necessarily part of their thought
probably
with
not at
it,
all.
or also, how robust is it to, a lot of dust or machine vibration or other noise around it. So some of this equipment, especially when we're in these kind of more sensitive dairy plants and so forth, we need this to be washed down. I mean, we're cleaning this equipment all the time.
Yeah.
Can this printer be washed down? Probably not. There's 20 different cables coming out of this for different reasons. Different reasons and connections. How am I going to clean that all the time? How do I prevent a lot of dust and buildup? Even some of these printers that I'll see, even for pallet labels or other parts of the line, they work great for the first month, but after they've been in the factory for a month, something happens to them. You got to think, some of this equipment, it really helps if you think about you're designing those iPad cases for a toddler, you know, or you see the laptop cases designed for more military grade use. I mean, these things are padded, protected. You can drop them, bang them. That's sometimes what you need, some of this equipment, because it was installed with the best of intentions, but then over time, in a bit of a sometimes rugged or abusive environment, sometimes this equipment, it doesn't work as well anymore.
I mean, that's another interesting question for all this. If you are on the leading edge and getting just any new hardware from a new vendor who's just coming out with it, are they really, have they got all that figured? And maybe they do. I'm just generalizing here, but do they have the sanitary part figured out up front with the new technology, or does that usually come later or not? But interesting challenges on using, and again, particularly something for the food industry. If you're in consumer products, you're probably not hosing everything down, or at least not as much, kind of thing. So
other products, probably not as much.
Yeah, particular challenge to food industry. Actually, I got to ask one more. What, because we did ask a guest question of you. What question would you like to ask a future guest on the show?
So again, I'm trying to bring in the perspective of quality and, how are we going to clean this? How are we going to ensure that this doesn't add a new risk or hazard to our process? How are we going to keep the equipment clean? So for technology solution providers, kind of where on their priority list of design criteria is sanitary design and the ruggedness of the equipment, and if it's not towards the top, why? Or maybe kind of goes along with that. I'm curious of, anytime there's a project in a plant and you're installing new technology, new equipment, how often do they think to always include the quality group and ensure you're getting their perspective?
Yes,
You know,
good question. Good question. That's one. That's one. I'll selfishly plug here. We on label inspection systems really seek to engage quality, because sometimes project managers will not, and then they hand over something to the quality manager and say, "Here you go, this is yours. It works for your department. You have no clue how it works, and you weren't involved at all." But good
yeah.
question. And yeah, I wonder if, I mean, I'd love to know from, again, some of the hardware vendors, is that a focus? How much of a focus is that? Are they producing? How are they producing for these environments that really need sanitary stuff, and so it's a main focus? Or, you know what, it's not. Your food industries like the B team, and they'll get. We'll make it more hygienic later. I swear, honest. After we make
Right,
the
right.
third generation.
Mm-hmm.
Good question. We'll see. Well, Leslie, thank you very much for joining me on the Industry 4.0 podcast. Excellent conversation, some insightful, real world grounded stuff to think about amongst buzz and excitement about the future. Like, yeah, it's got to be clean. The future needs to be clean. Let's get that
Needs
straight.
to- Mhm.
Not just
Yeah,
water.
no. Always include your quality team and your sanitation team. We're partners in this. We love technology. We just want to make sure it's not adding any new risks.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, and yeah, thanks for coming on, Leslie.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
You're welcome. And
All
thank
right.
you to everyone listening. We would love to hear from you. Follow Grantek on LinkedIn to stay up to date with everything we're doing. Subscribe to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek, wherever you get your podcasts. Email us any questions or feedback to info@grantek.com. And please join us again next time on the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek.